Threatened and Endangered, or TNE, species considerations for Modot and the Federal Highway Administration federally funded projects include potential impacts to rare plants, animals, critical habitat, and natural communities like caves, prairies, and karst. Federal laws require the Federal Highway Administration and Modot to thoroughly address any potential impacts their projects might have on federally listed TNE species and eliminate or minimize those impacts. To determine which species may exist within your project area, the Modot specialist will obtain the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Information for Planning and Conservation Species List and review the Missouri Department of Conservation or MDC Missouri Natural Heritage Database. To start the Threatened and Endangered Species Review, the Modot specialist will obtain the Information, Planning, and Conservation System or IPAC species list and review the MDC Natural Heritage Database. These two resources will determine the federally listed species, state-listed species, and species of conservation concern that should be reviewed for project impacts. Modot environmental staff are required to make an effects or impact determination for each species on the IPAC or Natural Heritage Review report. The effects or impact determination should include a description of the species' habitat and a determination if the species or habitat will be impacted. All documentation can be uploaded to the RES through the project attachments. Any commitments required for compliance should be developed into Job Special Provisions, or JSPs, that are included in the project contracts. Fieldwork and all necessary approvals by environmental agencies could impact the project schedule and should be considered when developing the project schedule. The district initiates this process by submitting an RES to the Design Division. The district may be required to obtain and submit additional information about the project at this stage. Any findings pertinent to the project will be relayed to the district in the RES response and through core team participation. During the location and conceptual plan stage, the environmental specialist performs a cursory identification of potential issues related to TNE species or other sensitive biological resources. The environmental specialist reviews recent publications, reports, and databases related to these resources to determine whether any TNE species are known to occur in the area and the likelihood that the project will have a negative impact on such species or other biological resources. During the preliminary plan stage, if no TNE issues have been identified to date, a process similar to that described for the location and conceptual plan stage project screening is repeated. The district initiates this process by submitting an RES to the Design Division. The environmental specialist screens the project and verifies that no new information has become available since the last screening. Any new findings pertinent to the project will be relayed to the district in the RES response, and the environmental specialist will discuss appropriate actions with the project manager. At this stage, if it has been determined that the project could have an impact on a TNE species or critical habitat, the environmental specialist will begin coordinating with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to determine the type of consultation, formal or informal, that will be necessary. Depending on the project schedule, the extent of the potential impact, the type of consultation necessary, the species impacted, etc., the environmental specialist may begin consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at this stage. Many Modot projects require U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Section 404 permits, and some require U.S. Coast Guard permits. These agencies will not issue permits until all ESA requirements have been completed with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, so it is important that coordination with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service begin early in the project development process. At the right-of-way plan stage, if no TNE issues have been identified to date, the process described for earlier stages is repeated. The district initiates this process by submitting an RES to the Design Division whereupon the environmental specialist will screen the project and make sure no new information has become available since the last screening. Any new findings pertinent to the project will be relayed to the district in the RES response, and the environmental specialist will discuss appropriate actions with the project manager. If it has been determined that the project could have an impact on a T&E species or critical habitat, consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service should be underway or should begin. The district will be asked to provide additional information about the project during consultation. District staff may also be asked to attend meetings and/or site visits to help develop or comment on suggested conservation measures. The environmental specialist will keep the district involved throughout the consultation process to assure that no commitments are made that cannot be met. At final design plan stage, if no T&E issues have been identified to date, the same process is repeated. If no threatened or endangered species issued are identified, the district will be notified that T&E issues are clear for this project. At this stage, if it has been determined that the project could impact a T&E species or critical habitat, consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service should be underway or already completed. The environmental specialist will keep the district informed of the status of this consultation and the projected completion date. The IPAC provides the federally listed threatened and endangered species that may exist within the project area. The IPAC used must be less than 90 days old. An effects determination must be made for each species listed. Effect determinations include no effect, may affect not likely to adversely affect, and may affect likely to adversely affect. Please refer to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Consultation Handbook for guidance on effect determinations. When making the effects determination, refer to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Consultation Handbook for additional guidance. A no effect determination can be made when the species and/or its habitat is either not present or will not be affected by the project. An example of a no effect determination would be when threatened and endangered bats that roost in trees are listed for a project area, and suitable roost trees are either not present or will not be affected by the project. Written documentation in the RES indicating a no effect determination is made by the environmental specialist. A may affect not likely to adversely affect determination can be made when the species and/or its habitat is present and may be affected by the project. Indirect effects, both on-site and off-site, should be considered. An example of a may affect not likely to adversely affect determination is when a threatened or endangered mussel is present directly downstream of a bridge replacement. Because the bridge replacement may impact water quality downstream of the project site, and the water quality impact may affect the mussel species but is not anticipated to adversely affect the mussel species, it would therefore receive a may affect not likely to adversely affect determination. This determination may require U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service verification or informal U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service consultation. A may affect likely to adversely affect determination can be made when the species will be adversely impacted. Indirect effects both on-site and off-site should be considered. Formal U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service consultation is required, and mitigation may also be required. An example of a may affect likely to adversely affect determination would be a situation in which the same mussel described earlier had its mussel bed destroyed during construction, or the downstream contaminants from the bridge replacement altered the mussel bed, killed the mussels, or reduced the mussel population. Following formal consultation, mitigation could include restoration of a degraded stretch of stream that can support the threatened or endangered mussel. Like federally listed species, an impact determination should be made for state-listed species and species of conservation concern. Though the species effects determinations, as described in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Consultation Handbook, do not apply to state-listed species, the environmental specialist will describe whether the species or their habitat will be affected by the project. Migratory birds and bats can use bridges and culverts to roost and build nests. Thus, if your project contains a bridge or culvert and you are taking photos, please provide photos showing the underside of the bridge and/or inside of the culvert. Habitat of federally listed bats are often affected by transportation projects. Therefore, the Federal Highway Administration and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service entered into an agreement in April of 2015 for streamlining consultation for projects that are not likely to adversely affect Indian and northern long-eared bats. Generally, if the suitable bat summer habitat trees to be removed for the project are entirely within 100 feet of the existing road, and Modot and the Federal Highway Administration agree to seasonal tree clearing, which is clearing suitable bat habitat only between November 1st and March 31st, then the project likely qualifies for programmatic consultation. Formal bat programmatic consultation may occur when suitable roost trees are present and tree clearing occurs between 100 to 300 feet from the road, bridge, or railroad. A letter from Modot that commits to paying mitigation is required documentation. Tree clearing may occur outside the November 1st and March 31st period. However, additional monetary mitigation would be required. If tree clearing also occurs outside 300 feet from the road, bridge, or railroad, then the project does not qualify for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service bat programmatic consultation. When the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service bat programmatic consultation cannot occur, individual consultation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is completed. Modot projects do not typically require U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service informal or formal consultation. However, on occasion, when a species effect cannot be determined or when a threatened or endangered species is affected, informal or formal consultation will be completed. Informal consultation is conducted when a T&E species or critical habitat is known or likely to occur in the area of a proposed project, but Modot, who is acting for the Federal Highway Administration, has determined that the project is not likely to adversely affect the species. Informal consultation can only be done if the Federal Highway Administration and Modot can provide data to show that they have removed all potential for their project to have an adverse effect on the species or its critical habitat. Informal consultation should be submitted 3 to 6 months prior to letting to allow time to complete the project and avoid project delays. Formal consultation is required when it is determined that a project is likely to adversely affect a federally listed species or critical habitat. The purpose of formal consultation is to identify and resolve potential conflicts between a proposed project and a T&E species or critical habitat. The process is initiated when the Federal Highway Administration submits a letter to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service requesting formal consultation for a project. A biological assessment, or BA, usually accompanies the letter. Modot environmental staff prepare the BA, which contains specific, detailed information on a federally listed threatened or endangered species or designated critical habitat that may be present in or near the project area. The BA also includes an impact assessment and describes conservation measures that will be implemented to eliminate or minimize the project's impacts on the species. When possible, formal consultation should begin at least 1 to 2 years prior to letting to allow time to complete the process. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1918, or MBTA, makes it illegal for anyone to take, possess, import, export, transport, sell, purchase, barter, or offer for sale, purchase, or barter any migratory bird or the parts, nests, or eggs of such a bird except under the terms of a valid permit issued pursuant to federal regulations. The migratory bird species protected by the Act are listed in 50 CFR 1013. Take refers to killing adults, eggs, or young of the migratory bird. Modot frequently encounters the nests of bird species protected by the MBTA while conducting bridge repairs and replacements, as well as improvements to large diameter culverts or pipes. Several bird species protected by the MBTA commonly construct their nests on the underside of bridge decks, on the substructure of bridges, or within large diameter pipes or culverts. These species most often include cliff swallows, barn swallows, eastern phoebes, and American robins. Other MBTA-protected species can also be found nesting on bridges, but they are not common bird species protected by the MBTA. In addition, several bird species that are not protected by the MBTA are often seen nesting on bridges. These include pigeons, European starlings, and house sparrows. These species are all non-native introductions to the U.S. and therefore they are not protected by the MBTA. All projects that involve impacts to the underside of bridge decks, the substructure, or large diameter pipes or culverts should be checked for the presence of nesting birds. This inspection can be performed by the district, bridge crews, or environmental staff. Presence of nests should be noted on the RES under the Known Concerns section. This district is responsible for reporting any nests known to be present on the structure when submitting an RES. If nests are present, the JSP for avoidance will be used and must be followed. If the district would like to include any bridges on the annual depredation permit, they must notify their environmental specialist. Bridges can be added to the permit at any time, but it is best to include it in the initial permit application. This is usually submitted to the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, or APHIS, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service each January. Removal of active nests under the depredation permit requires annual reporting to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The environmental specialist will distribute a form to district design and construction management staff late in the calendar year for reporting nests taken during the previous construction season. During RES reviews, environmental specialists will review the project scope and determine if the project has the potential to result in take of Migratory Bird Treaty Act or MBTA protected species. If so, the environmental specialist will work with the district to determine if nests are present on the structure, if not already known, including inspections conducted by environmental staff. The environmental specialist will confirm with the district the JSP will be used and whether a depredation permit will be needed prior to clearing migratory birds on the RES. The environmental specialist will apply for depredation permits if needed or requested based on information provided by the district. If a project is already under construction and nests are noted on the bridge, it will be the responsibility of the environmental specialist to determine if the nests are active, if they belong to an MBTA protected species, and to provide the district with options to avoid violations of the MBTA.